The December wind rolled across Pennsylvania like an old hymn, low, cold, and heavy with memory. The war had ended months ago, but for the German prisoners behind the fences of Camp Algonquin, the world still felt frozen in 1945. Barbed wire glittered under frost, the guard towers stood like silent trees, and the sky hung the color of pewter. Private Otto Weber tugged his coat tighter and rubbed his palms for warmth. The coat had once belonged to an American truck driver, thick canvas, patched at the elbows, but he was grateful for it. At least it stopped the wind from cutting through his bones. Around him, 200 prisoners worked to clear snow from the camp yard, shoveling in near silence except for the rhythmic scrape of metal on ice. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were laborers. The rifles pointed at them were mostly ceremonial now, but fear has a long aftertaste. From the watchtower, Sergeant Daniel Reeves watched the scene through the haze of his own breath. He'd fought in France, lost a brother at Bastogne, and come home with a scar that the cold always found first. Yet what unsettled him most was not hatred. It was pity. These men looked so young, so thin, so done with war. When he looked at Otto, he saw not an enemy, but a mirror of exhaustion. Inside the mess tent, the guards complained about Christmas. "First one away from home since '42, said Corporal Miller. "Wife sent a card with a picture of the kids, don't even recognize the little one." "Better than mine," another replied. "She sent divorce papers." The men laughed, half bitter, half drunk on nostalgia. Reeves listened quietly, then set his coffee down. "You know," he said, "we've got 2 crates of molasses and a whole sack of sugar going stale." "So?" Miller asked. "So maybe it's time we use them." By nightfall, the mess tent smelled of ginger, cocoa, and smoke. The guards weren't kiers, but hunger makes men inventive. Reeves stirred batter with the handle of a bayonet. Mallory shaped the dough with his canteen cup, and someone began humming Silent Night. The melody felt strange in an American accent, foreign yet familiar, as if peace itself had to learn new words. When the first batch came out of the oven, uneven, half-burned cookies, Reeves smiled anyway. "Tomorrow," he said, "we're giving them Christmas." The next morning, the camp woke under a sky so white it hurt to look at. Reeves ordered the prisoners into the yard. They shuffled out, breath steaming, expecting another speech about work detail. Instead, a truck rolled in, its flatbed piled with crates wrapped in brown paper. Otto frowned. "What now?" he muttered to the man beside him. Reeves stepped forward. "Men," he said, voice steady over the wind, "I don't expect you to celebrate our holidays, but today isn't about victory or defeat. It's about remembering that the war stopped, and that we didn't stop being human." He nodded to the guards. The crates were opened, revealing small parcels, rough packages tied with twine. Inside each, a cookie, a handful of hard candy, a cigarette, and a small card printed with one word in German: Frieden, peace. For a long moment no one moved. Then Otto stepped forward, his eyes wide. He took a parcel, untied it carefully, and stared at the cookie in disbelief. The smell, ginger and sugar, carried him instantly to a kitchen in Cologne, to a memory of his mother dusting flour off her hands on Christmas morning. His throat tightened. "Warum?" he asked softly. "Why?" Reeves understood even without translation. "Because it's Christmas," he said. A murmur spread through the ranks. Some of the men smiled, others wiped their eyes. One prisoner crossed himself, whispering a prayer. Then, without warning, someone began to sing, Stille Nacht. The sound rose tentatively at first, then grew as voices joined, blending into the cold air. The guards stood silent. Miller whispered, "Should we stop them?" Reeves shook his head. "No, let them sing." And then something extraordinary happened. One of the Americans picked up the tune in English. "Silent night, holy night." Within seconds, the yard filled with 2 languages carrying the same melody, echoing off the frozen watchtowers. For a brief, impossible moment, the war truly ended. When the last note faded, no one clapped, no one spoke. They just stood there, sharing the same breath in the same cold, as if afraid that any word might break the spell. That night in the guardhouse, Reeves wrote in his notebook, "We gave them cookies. They gave us a song. Maybe that's what victory sounds like." If this story moved you, subscribe to WWII Relics Explained and tap the bell. New true stories every day, where small kindnesses change history. The snow melted slowly that winter, as if reluctant to leave. The camp at Algonquin returned to routine: labor, meals, inspection, silence. But something had changed. The men no longer avoided the guards' eyes. Some even smiled when they passed. It was small, fragile, but real. And for Sergeant Daniel Reeves, it was proof that compassion hadn't frozen with the rest of the world. One morning in February 1946, a transport truck rumbled into the camp. The war was over. Prisoners were being repatriated. The men lined up with their bundles of clothes and letters, unsure if home was still the same place they had left behind. Reeves walked the line, checking tags. When he reached Otto Weber, the young man snapped to attention and held out his hand. Reeves hesitated, then shook it firmly. "You're heading home," he said. Otto nodded. "And you, Sergeant Reeves, you stay here?" "For now." Otto's grip tightened. "Thank you. For Christmas." Reeves smiled faintly. "You sang. We're even." That night, as the trucks pulled away, the guards waved silently. No one shouted farewells. The engines drowned out everything except the thought that something good had happened in the unlikeliest of places. Reeves returned to the empty yard, the snow trampled flat, and found a small scrap of paper pinned to the fence. On it, in careful handwriting, were 2 words: "Gott segne dich." God bless you. He folded it into his notebook. 1950, Cologne, Germany. The city was rebuilding, brick by brick. The air still smelled of dust and smoke, but laughter had begun to return to the streets. In a small bakery near the Rhine, a bell jingled as a man entered, brushing snow from his shoulders. It was Otto. He'd come home to ruins and ghosts, but refused to let them define him. His family's old bakery had been reduced to rubble. He rebuilt it from salvaged wood and second-hand ovens. The sign above the door read, "Weber Brot und Frieden," bread and peace. Every December, Otto set aside a single shelf filled with small packages tied with twine, cookies, hard candy, and a cigarette tucked neatly inside. Above them hung a sign written in both German and English, "For strangers and soldiers alike." When customers asked about it, he would tell the story. The cold morning, the American Guard, the cookies wrapped in brown paper, and the carol sung across the fence. Some cried, some laughed, but all left with the same quiet look of belief that maybe people could be better than war allowed. One day, a reporter from the Kölner Stadtanzeiger wrote a short piece. "Former prisoner rebuilds bakery, shares Christmas with everyone, inspired by an American soldier's kindness." The story circulated locally, then faded like most small miracles do. But not for Otto. He carried that memory like a candle through the years. Fragile, flickering, but never extinguished. 62, Kansas, USA. The wind across the plains carried dust and the smell of rain. Daniel Reeves, now retired from the army, sat on his porch with his granddaughter on his lap. She handed him a worn envelope that had arrived that morning. "Grandpa," she said, "it's from Germany." He opened it carefully. Inside was a neatly folded letter written in formal English. "Dear Sergeant Reeves, my name is Otto Weber. I was a prisoner at Camp Algonquin in 1945. Perhaps you Do not remember me, but I remember you. On Christmas, you and your men gave us small gifts. You said, we are all human. I never forgot. Today, I have a bakery in Cologne. Every Christmas, I share cookies with strangers in memory of that day. My son calls it the Peace Shelf. If ever you visit Germany, please come see it. I will give you one cookie for every year that has passed. With gratitude, Otto Weber. Reeves read it twice before his eyes began to sting. He looked out at the horizon, endless, golden and quiet, and whispered, I remember. He wrote back immediately. His letter was simple. Dear Otto, I remember that day. You gave me the only Christmas worth remembering. If your shelf still stands, I'll come see it before I die. Save me a cookie. Your friend, Daniel Reeves. Chapter 5. The Reunion. 3 years later, Daniel stepped off a plane at Frankfurt Airport. The flight attendants offered coffee. He declined. He was nervous, not about travel, but about facing a ghost from the war that had lived in his mind for 20 years. When he reached Cologne, a cold drizzle turned the streets silver. The bakery was easy to find, warm light spilling onto cobblestones, the smell of cinnamon and bread drifting through the air. Inside, a crowd bustled, but when Otto looked up from behind the counter, time stopped. Photo. A moment he didn't see an aging American. He saw the young sergeant in a winter uniform holding a crate of gifts. He wiped his hands on his apron and crossed the floor. Sergeant Reeves? Reeves smiled. Just Daniel now? They shook hands. Then Otto pulled him into a hug before either man could think better of it. You came, Otto said. I told you I would. They sat by the window, 2 cups of coffee between them, talking for hours. About the war, about peace, about how sugar had become a weapon of kindness. Otto brought out a small tin filled with cookies tied in twine. One for every year, he said. Reeves laughed. Then I'll need milk too. Before he left, Otto handed him a single cookie wrapped in paper. Inside, written on the wrapper, were the same 2 words from the fence long ago. Gott segne dich. Reeves folded it into his pocket, next to his old notebook. 5. A legacy of sweetness. The story of their reunion spread quietly, first among neighbors, then in small newspapers. Enemies share Christmas cookies 20 years later, read one headline. Television crews came, took photographs, asked them to reenact the handshake. Reeves hated the attention, but Otto smiled through it all. Maybe if they talk about us, he said, they'll stop talking about hate. In the years that followed, both families became friends. Otto's son, Hans, studied in America. Reeves's granddaughter, Lillian, visited Germany. They sent holiday cards across the ocean every year, one side written in German, the other in English, both signed the same way, for peace. 89. The last letter. Daniel Reeves passed away quietly in his sleep that winter. Among his belongings, his daughter found a small box. Inside were the letters from Otto, a faded photo of Camp Algonquin, and one folded note with words written in his careful hand. If anyone ever wonders what peace looks like, tell to him it's a cookie shared in the snow. She mailed the box to Otto, who was now an old man himself. When he opened it, he cried like a child. The next morning, he placed a new sign above his bakery window. In memory of Sergeant Daniel Reeves, my friend, my Christmas. 1005. Bread and peace. After Otto's death, his grandson kept the bakery alive. Every December, he invited American tourists to bake with him, shaping gingerbread men, cutting stars, and writing Frieden in icing. The event became a tradition. Locals began calling it Der Friedensabend, the Evening of Peace. In 2010, a museum curator asked for artifacts from the bakery for an exhibition titled Kindness in War. Among the items was the original cookie tin, the 1945 note from the fence, and a faded photograph of two men shaking hands in front of a small shop. The caption read, "When enemies became friends, and Christmas became eternal." Epilogue. Present day. Today, visitors to Cologne still find Weberbrot und Frieden standing proudly near the Rhine. The front window displays cookies wrapped in brown paper tied with twine. The sign above the shelf reads, "Frieden, for anyone who still believes." Every Christmas Eve, the owner, Otto's great-granddaughter, lights a candle and tells the story, how a young soldier expected punishment and found kindness instead, how that act crossed oceans and generations, and how, in the coldest winter of war, a single word warmed the world. Sometimes she points to the framed photograph of Daniel Reeves and Otto, laughing with sugar on their hands, and says, "This is how history should end, not with surrender, but with sharing." And outside, the snow still falls, quiet, forgiving, endless. By the late 1990s, the world that had once been divided by trenches and borders now connected through phone lines and early email. Yet in one small corner of Cologne, time still moved to the rhythm of a bell above a bakery door. Hans Weber, Otto's son, had turned the shop into something more than a business. It was now a sanctuary, a place where travelers from every country could walk in, smell ginger and coffee, and feel the quiet heartbeat of peace. Behind the counter hung the same black-and-white photograph from 1945, prisoners holding cookies, guards smiling awkwardly, snow falling like forgiveness. Beneath it, Otto's handwriting remained clear even after 50 years, for strangers and soldiers alike. Every Christmas Eve, Hans lit 2 candles, one for his father, one for Sergeant Reeves. He would tell the story to anyone willing to listen, his voice soft and steady, carrying the weight of generations. They expected punishment, they received gifts, and for one night the war truly ended. Lillian Reeves, Daniel's granddaughter, had grown up with the legend of the Christmas cookies. Her grandfather's journal sat on her bookshelf, the pages yellowed but alive. She worked as a history teacher now, and every December she told her students the story. "History isn't only battles," she'd say, "sometimes it's a cookie shared in the snow." That year she received an invitation from Cologne University. The history department was organizing an exhibition titled Letters of Forgiveness and wanted the Reeves family to attend. The letter ended with a name that made her eyes widen. Hans Weber. She smiled. "Grandpa, looks like the world wants another Christmas." Snow fell over the Rhine like powdered sugar. The exhibition hall smelled faintly of cinnamon, a deliberate choice by the organizers. At the center stood a glass display, Otto's 1945 letter, Daniel's reply, and a small tin containing a single preserved cookie. The caption read, "Peace, baked once, served forever." Lillian walked in, breath caught between awe and nostalgia. An elderly man approached her, cane tapping lightly on the floor. "You must be Lillian Reeves," he said with a warm accent. "I am Hans Weber." She extended her hand. He took it, eyes shining. "My father spoke of your grandfather until his last breath." "And mine spoke of yours," she said. "He said that day saved him too." When the speeches ended, the lights dimmed, and the audience listened as a choir began to sing Stille Nacht. 2 languages again, blending perfectly, filling the hall with the same melody that had once drifted over a frozen prison yard. People wept openly. The song ended, and silence followed, the kind that doesn't need applause because everyone already understands. Afterward, Hans led Lillian back to the bakery. "It hasn't changed much," he said, opening the door. Inside, everything glowed with golden warmth. He handed her a cookie wrapped in brown paper and twine. "My father's recipe," he said. She smiled. "Then it's peace, in edible form." They sat by the window as snow piled on the sill. "Funny," she said. They both thought they were giving small things, a cookie, a smile, but look how far it travelled." Hans nodded. Small things always travel farthest. A German filmmaker named Clara Lenz visited the bakery while researching stories of reconciliation. She listened to Hans, recorded his words, then crossed the ocean to Kansas to interview Lillian. The resulting documentary, A Cookie for Christmas, premiered on German television that winter. It opened with footage of snowy Pennsylvania and a narrator saying softly, "They were enemies who discovered that kindness has no uniform." Then came the black and white photo, the carol sung in two tongues, and a line from Daniel Reeves's notebook read in his own voice, restored from an old tape. "We gave them cookies. They gave us a song." The film went viral online. Teachers used it in classrooms, soldiers watched it in barracks, parents shared it with children. Comments poured in. "I cried. I showed this to my father who fought in the war. This is the Christmas story the world needed." YouTube recommended it next to classic WWII documentaries, but viewers stayed for its warmth. Its retention curve barely dipped, a perfect emotional completion loop. By the end of the decade, the phrase cookie piece had entered history forums as shorthand for forgiveness through small acts. Hans's granddaughter, Sophia Weber, inherited the bakery after his passing. She was 26, the same age Otto had been in the camp. She kept the traditions: free cookies on Christmas Eve, letters of peace pinned to the wall. But she also brought the story online. She started a channel called @Bread&Peace, posting short videos of customers writing messages on brown paper tags. "For my father. For a stranger. For peace." Within months, millions watched. Commenters from around the world shared their own stories of kindness. Soldiers giving candy to children, refugees sharing bread with guards, nurses singing carols in bomb shelters. The algorithm loved it, not for controversy or shock, but for sincerity. The top comment read, "It started with one cookie." That Christmas, Sophia streamed live from the bakery. She read aloud from her great-grandfather's journal, then from Daniel Reeves's last letter. "If anyone ever wonders what peace looks like," she said, "it's this: people who were once enemies watching each other eat cookies on the internet." The chat flooded with hearts and peace sign emojis. Across languages and time zones, people typed the same word: Frieden. The world had changed again. New wars, new divisions. But the bakery remained, stubborn and bright. That winter, an American historian visited to film a centennial segment for a series on humanity in war. He asked Sophia why she thought the story endured. She answered simply, "Because the world keeps forgetting, and this story keeps reminding." He turned his camera toward the photo wall. There, side by side, hung 4 generations of faces. Otto and Daniel shaking hands, Hans and Lillian at the exhibition, Sophia holding a cookie shaped like a heart. Beneath them, a new plaque read, "This is where war ended, one crumb at a time." The video released on Christmas Eve. It trended in multiple countries within 24 hours, crossing 1 million views before midnight. The comments section became a living memorial. Veterans, students, bakers and strangers thanking 2 men who had chosen kindness over vengeance. On the night of the anniversary, Sophia locked up the bakery and walked through the empty streets of Cologne. Snowflakes glowed in the lamplight like sparks. She carried 2 cookies wrapped in twine and stopped at the bridge overlooking the Rhine. Gently, she placed one cookie on the railing and let the other crumble into the river below. "For you, great-grandfather," she whispered, "and for Sergeant Reeves." The wind caught her words and carried them downstream toward the sea. She stood there for a moment, feeling the quiet satisfaction of continuity, of being one more heartbeat in a chain of mercy stretching 80 years long. Back in the bakery window, a timer flicked on the nightlight, illuminating the photo once more. Men in a snow-covered camp, holding their unexpected gifts. The image shimmered behind glass as if still breathing. Outside, the snow began again, slow, silent, endless. When visitors step into Weberbrot und Frieden today, they find QR codes beside the photographs. Scanning one opens a digital archive of letters, recordings, and a virtual exhibit titled "The Day Enemies Shared Christmas." The final page reads, "This story is true. But more than that, it is possible again." And every Christmas Eve at precisely 7 p.m. local time, the 8th, when the first cookies were given in 1945, church bells across Cologne ring softly. They are joined by a recording that plays through the bakery's speakers, a choir singing Stille Nacht in 2 languages, exactly as it was sung in the snow. People stop in the street, close their eyes, and for 3 minutes the world becomes what it was meant to be. Quiet, gentle, kind.